Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Mimi. I am so excited for today's video because it is my October TBR slash recommendations video, and I'm so excited because October is finally here. I feel like everyone has been talking about fall and getting in the fall mood, but like October is just my favorite month. I love October. I love everything that October brings, like scary movies, scary book, pumpkin patches, fall, crisp leaves. Everything about October is just my absolute favorite. So I am so excited to pick out my TBR for October and also just share some book recommendations that I think people will enjoy during October. A lot of the books that I am going to be recommending are books that I think people could also read in general in fall. It doesn't necessarily have to be October, but I feel like October is just peak fall mood. So I feel like a lot of people are going to want to read these books in October specifically, but I do think you could read these books really at any time, but specifically in October or fall. So I have them broken down into different genres. So I'm going to be recommending some romance, some fantasy, and some thriller horrors. I don't really have any specific fiction recommendations just because none of them are really like October specific, so I didn't include any, but these are the books that I've looked at and thought screamed October more specifically, I guess, or like just a good time to read it is October. I feel like I'm rambling. I have no idea. But anyway, let's get to the book recommendation. Okay. So I am going to be starting with romance, and the first book that I have for romance is actually Indigo Ridge by Devney Perry. This is honestly such a good read because it gives you romance with also some thriller mystery aspects to it. So the story follows Winslow. She moves to a small town where her grandfather is actually the mayor, and she's also on the police force. And when she moves there, she meets this guy named Griffin Eden, and this is The Edens. So it's part of a series, and it follows each of the siblings, but you can read them on their own. I don't think you have to read them all, but this is the first one anyway. If you love thriller mystery but also love romance, I feel like this is a good pick because you kind of get the best of both worlds with this one. But yeah, this one was interesting, and I definitely recommend. The next book I have is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. I think this is going to be a 3-book series. The second book is already out, but I haven't read it yet, but I have read Butcher and the Blackbird, and this is screaming October read. I don't think you can get more October than like a 2 serial killer romance, and it's just such an interesting take on a love story, especially since like you're battling with the fact that they're serial killers, but they're not like your typical serial killers. They're serial killers who kill serial killers. But it's such an interesting read, and I definitely think it's great for October time. The next book I have is actually like such a cozy October recommendation, and it's The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This book was just, I absolutely love this book. It was like found family with a little bit of romance, but it's not even just like about the romance. It's about so much more than that, and it's just like such a cozy witchy vibe. And there's, like I said, there's a found family aspect and like a little bit of romance, and like the setting of the book is in this like big mansion. Like it's just such a good cozy witchy read, and I highly recommend this. This follows Mika, who is a witch, but she kind of hides that she's a witch. She ends up getting a message. She's being asked to teach 3 young witches how to be witches, essentially. It's just such a lovely read, and I highly recommend if you're just looking for something not scary but still giving you spooky vibes, like following witches. I think this was really great, and I highly recommend. The next book I have is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I read this when it first came out, and I absolutely love this book. It follows Florence Day, who's a writer, and she ends up finding out that her father passed away, so she ends up going back home for the funeral, and we end up finding out that she can actually see ghosts, and she ends up seeing this one ghost in particular. But this was also just like another cozy romance where you're getting spooky elements without it necessarily being scary or anything like that. Like it's definitely like a cozy romance mystery, I would say, that reads a little fiction too. Like I'd say it's not just about the romance. I don't know, the story was great. I was hooked, and I honestly recommend this for October reading if you want to switch it up with like a romance. This was a good one. So those are all the romances I had. I don't really read romances during October because it's when I tend to read a lot of my thriller, mystery, horror books, or fantasy. I tend to get into fantasy a lot during October. So those are the romances that I recommend. And now I'm going to be talking about some fantasy books that I recommend. The first is actually Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. She wrote the Shadow and Bone series and the Six of Crows series, and this is her other series called Ninth House. I actually really like this one. This gives the best dark academia vibes. Like, if you like dark academia, this book is for you. The second book also recently came out. It's called Hellbent, and that one is also really good. I liked it way more than this one. This one is kind of like building the setting, kind of trying to understand everything that's happening in this world. The second one obviously takes it and runs with it. This book is honestly just a ride. There's secret societies, there's Yale University, which to me, Yale in fall gives such dark academia vibes. And there's magic, and this is just like such a dark, magic-y, vibey book. This book is just a ride, and the series is so good. Like I said, if you love dark academia, if you love secret societies, if you love dark magic, like, this book is it. Following like a similar vibe, the next book I have is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This book is so fun. The power system in this is so different. It's actually through these cards, and there's 12 cards, and each of the cards has like a different magical power associated with it, which I thought was so cool. So in order for you to utilize that magic, you have to have the card. So that was super cool. Picture, like, literally the cover is exactly how I pictured the world. Like, just like this greenish-y, dark toned world, and the story is just so interesting, and this was such a good read. Both books are out. The second book is called Two Twisted Crowns, so you can read both of them. And honestly, I just highly recommend. It gives just such great, dark, magical vibes, and this was just really great. The next book I have is actually Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I just finished reading Golden Sun, which is the second book, and honestly, I'm really enjoying the series. The first book is a little bit dense just because it's building up the world. You're kind of like figuring out everything that's happening. The second book is a whirlwind, but this series is honestly just so good. It's more sci-fi than fantasy, but honestly, it's just so good. The first book especially was just, you get taken into like this complex system of colors and the colors associated to your rank in society. So reds are the lowest of the low, like they work in the mines. They know no world outside of their bottom of the bunk mining world. The system can get a little confusing, but essentially you know that the golds are at the top and the reds are at the bottom, and in between there's just a whole bunch of colors that kind of range in importance. But the first book kind of just mainly follows the reds and the golds. But highly recommend the series. It is honestly just, I don't know. This book was good, and I definitely recommend for, like I said, October or just the fall season, but this one was really good. So the next two books I have are actually by the same author. The first one is Vicious, and the second one is Gallant, both by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab is honestly one of my favorite authors. Her writing is just so good, and these two books are so different but so good. So this book follows Victor and Eli, and they both were college roommates, and both of them had like this interest in researching like adrenaline and near-death experiences, and they end up developing like this theory that under the right circumstances you could develop extraordinary abilities through these experiences, through these like near-death adrenaline experiences. The story just goes from there, and it's honestly such a ride. This is a duology, so the second book is called Vengeful, and the ride that you go through in this story, if you like dark, moody, supernatural vibes, like this book was such a ride. This book I highly recommend. The second book too, Vengeful. Both of these books so good. Highly recommend this series. And then the second book, Gallant, This book is honestly just beautiful. When you read it, there's just like art that you see throughout the book that's honestly so fun to look at and get to see while you're reading it. The story is just like so different, and this book, I absolutely loved this book when I read it. The story is so fun and different. I don't want to say too much about it because honestly, I went into this blind and I absolutely thought that that was the best way to go about it, just because it kept me more interested in what was going to happen next. This book, though, was so fun, so different, and I highly, highly, highly recommend if you haven't read this, because this was a good one. The next book I have is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. This was such a good book. Like, I absolutely love this. It's a cat and mouse, like, witchy vibe, but it also has, like, high society, so, like, you get a lot of fashion, and, like, this book was just honestly so good. So, this book follows Rune, who's an undercover witch, and Gideon, who is a witch hunter. Need I say more? Of course, Gideon is trying to find the witch that's helping witches escape, and the person who he's looking for is Rune. And this book is just such a ride. I love the tension. It's like the cat and mouse aspect of it is just like a lot of fun. The banter, everything about this book was just so good, and highly, 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 highly recommend this. And also the cover is stunning, and this was such a good read. The next book I have is like a fantasy that also reads like historical fiction-y, but also like fiction-y. I don't know. But it's R.F. Kuang's Babel. If you have not read this book, you need to read this book. Yes, it's long. Yes, it's wordy. Yes, it can feel a little intimidating, especially because of the wordage used, and this book is just so good. If you like dark academia, like it gives off dark academia vibes, and it takes place in Oxford. Like, this book was just so interesting. I honestly loved it. And if you have time to read this one, I think you should put it on your list, because this book honestly was just so good. And the last fantasy book that I want to recommend is one of my favorite series, and it's Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. I love this series so much. There are 3 books in the series, and honestly, this one starts it off, the second one kicks it off, and the third one ends it all, and it's just so good, and I highly recommend this series. It is just so good. It gives witchy vibes, but also taking place in Italy, and something about the Italy vibes is so good. It's just, I don't know, something about this series though hit when I wanted it to hit. So these books follow the 7 circles of hell. So you have, like, you know, House Wrath, House Lust, House greed, all of like the 7 sins or whatever. Each of them has their own house. This one mainly follows Amelia and Wrath, but oh my gosh, so good. She's also coming out with other books that follow each of the other brothers. The most recent one is Throne of the Fallen, and that one follows Envy and Camilla, and that one is just, Envy is just so good. So honestly, I highly recommend this series. I highly recommend Throne of the Fallen. Like, these books have had me in a chokehold. I highly, highly, highly recommend these books. This series is just so good, and I can't wait to read the books of the other brothers, because these are so good. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Okay, and now we are on to all of my thriller, horror, mystery recommendations, which is what I personally love reading during this time. So I have obviously quite a few recommendations. The first is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This book is dark academia bundled up in one. It's a college campus murder mystery. Like, this book is just so good. So this kind of essentially follows 6 friends who went to college together. Someone ends up dying, and years pass. They're all reunited because of college reunion, and because, you know, everyone's reunited, talks of the murder get brought up, and we start learning things that happened in the past and essentially finding out what happened to the person who was murdered. And this book, such a ride. I honestly love these kinds of books, and this one was just so good, and I highly recommend this one. The next book I have is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I honestly think this is one of my favorite Riley Sager books because he did Haunted House so well in this one. This one had me spooked. So this one follows a family who moved into this house and they lived there for like about 20 days before they all end up leaving at like the middle of the night, just moving away from this house. And this story follows Maggie, who ends up having to go back to that house, and she essentially finds out what happened all those years ago when the family like literally just fled the house in the middle of the night. This story is just such a ride. I highly recommend this one. This one, honestly, like I said, it's one of my favorite Riley Sager books. He just did something with this book that I will recommend this book forever. I highly recommend it if you like creepy houses and just... This was fun. This is another dark academia vibey book. If We Were Villains is one of my favorite books. I absolutely love this. I absolutely love this cover. It's honestly one of my favorite covers. It has college setting, Shakespeare, has that murder mystery element to it. A lot of people compare this one to Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I haven't read that one. I'm hoping to read that one this month, but a lot of people compare it to that one. But this one, I will say, if you don't really like Shakespeare, tread lightly, because this is heavy in Shakespeare. The people that they follow are all in this Shakespeare class, so they tend to converse as Shakespeare would. So if you don't like Shakespeare, this might not be for you, but I still think you should give it a try because honestly, this book is just so good. The mystery elements, you just get it in this book, and I highly, highly recommend this one because I love this one so much. Next, I have another haunted house vibe book. This one is The September House by Carissa Orlando. This book is just crazy. I have no other words than to say that this book is just crazy. Know that it's haunted house. Know that we're going to get ghosts. And know that this is going to be crazy. You should read this book. That's all I really have to say about it because it's just, to describe this book, I feel is just going to give it away. And I feel like this book just needs to be taken in as it is, but it's going to be fun. And it's really not that spooky. So if you're afraid because it's like ghosts and like haunted house, it's not that scary. At least I didn't think it was, but I also love spooky. Highly recommend this. I love a haunted house, and this was exactly that. So this was good. Next, I have The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I'm so excited because she did just also come out with another book recently, but this one is like more... This one is another dark, magic-y book, but the vibes of this book are just dark, spooky, old-timey, but not in a bad way old-timey. Like, don't think... Kind of like Heartless Hunter gives off like old-timey, but not really vibes. That's what this gives off too. It has, like I said, witches, and just, it's definitely got like that church versus witchcraft separation, and like you can't consort with witches because that's bad, especially if you're a member of the church. This was just such a good October read, and I highly recommend you read this in October because it has just the best October vibes. So the next books I have are both by Grady Hendrix. Honestly, I think Grady Hendrix just has a fun time writing scary stories. So the first one is called My Best Friend's Exorcism, which, if I'm not mistaken, they made into a movie or a TV show or something. Like, I think you could watch this or something. I could be wrong, but I think you can. I'll let you know. And then the next one is How to Sell a Haunted House. Honestly, I think both of these are great reads for October. You get an exorcism, you get a haunted house in both of these. Like, I think these are both really great, and I think they kind of speak for themselves, an exorcism and a haunted house. You know what you're getting when you go into these, so definitely recommend these. Also, the cover of this one is honestly just one of my favorites. It has like VHS, old-timey vibes, and both of these were fun, and I definitely recommend for October, especially because neither of these are too scary. So if you're not one for super scary books, I think both of these are actually really great because they're not, in my opinion, that spooky. So I don't think you could go wrong with picking up either of these. The next book I have is by Darcy Coates, and it's called The Haunting of Ashburn House. I enjoyed this book so much more than I thought I was going to. It's like I said, it's like I have a whole bunch of haunted house recommendations for you because I love haunted houses. Something about a haunted house just gives the best vibes, and this one did exactly that too. This one is like everybody talks about Ashburn House. Everyone knows it's supposed to be spooky. There's always this light that comes out of the house, and like, you know, everyone talks about this house and everyone wants to see this house. Well, Adrian gets a letter saying this house was left to her when her, I think it was like great aunt, and she has no place to go. So of course she's like, oh my God, a place to stay. Of course I'm going to take it. And of course she moves in and all these creepy things start to happen. This one was fun though. I really liked this one. There was a scene that had me so spooked. I could still picture it in my head. This one I do think treads a little bit scarier. So if you're not into super scary ones, definitely proceed with caution. But I honestly think this one was really good, and I think it's worth the read if you're willing to read it. So definitely recommend this one. The next book I have is Mary by Nat Cassidy. This book was so weird and crazy, but you gotta read it to get it, you know, because this book follows Mary, who she's like this middle-aged woman who starts experiencing some weird changes in her body, and her doctor's like, oh, you're just going through menopause. And she's like, okay, but that doesn't explain why when I look in a mirror I see these weird things, you know. But she doesn't tell the doctor this, obviously, but she's just trying to live a normal life, and just a lot of crazy things happen. And honestly, you just gotta read this book to understand. And I think this was just like kind of like a crazy ride. It's a creepy book. Things happen that are just like, what the heck? I wouldn't really say it's scary. I just don't know if my tolerance for scary is higher than most people's, but I don't think this was scary, but I do think it's kind of like creepy at times. You're gonna go through a ride reading this. The next book I have is called Slewfoot by Brom. This book is so cool, and I don't know how else to explain it aside from that. Like, there are pictures in here of like some of the characters that we meet. I loved this book. I highly recommend it. The back says it's an ancient spirit awakens in a dark wood. The wild folk call him father, slayer, protector. The colonists call him Slewfoot, demon, devil. To Abatha, a recently widowed outcast, alone and vulnerable in her pious village, he is the only one she can turn to for help. Together they ignite a battle between pagan and Puritan, one that threatens to destroy the entire village, leaving nothing but ashes and bloodshed in its wake. Guys, I could not recommend this book enough. It's very old-timey. Like, I think it takes place in the 1600s. Like, that's the vibe you're getting. So definitely old-timey, but it just reads so interestingly, and the story following Slewfoot and Agatha, and like, I highly recommend this for October because this is such a good book. The next book I have is an interesting one, and I feel like a lot of people have heard about it because I do think it was talked about a lot recently, but it's called The Troop by Nick Cutter. This is not for everyone. If you don't like descriptive, gory, those two things, I don't think you should pick up this book. But I do think that the story was crazy. It follows Scoutmaster Tim, where once a year he and his little troop boys all go to this remote island to essentially work on their earning their badges. So they all go camping for like a short weekend, and essentially a bioengineered experiment goes wrong, and it spreads fast, and it's descriptive, and if certain things make you feel queasy, maybe don't read this, but it is such an interesting story, and if you can look past a little descriptiveness, this is going to be such a crazy ride, and I do recommend this. The next book I have is The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. I love a creepy kid, and this book did creepy kid so well. I highly recommend this book if you like creepy kids. This one isn't scary per se. This one's more just like thrilling. Essentially, it follows this couple. They both work in the hospital. They both have wanted a child, and they find this abandoned 6-year-old girl ends up being brought to the hospital, and when they meet her, they kind of decide we should take her home. We should give her a home, adopt her, love her. And that's all you need to know. Read this, because creepy kids are creepy, and I could not recommend this one more. I absolutely love this one. This book creeps you out. It makes you so wary of adopting a kid, and you should read this. And the last book I have is called Seed by Ania Alborn. I might have said that wrong, and I apologize. This one it's kind of short. It's less than 300 pages. It's less than 250 pages. It's short. It's a quick read, but it's gonna creep you out for sure. This one's very supernatural, and it has to do with like this. They call it a profound evil, and I think that's a great word choice. There's a profound evil that follows the family in this book, and there are children and creepy kids again, and this book I just highly recommend. This one was crazy. If you don't really like supernatural, demonic, think conjuring, like if you're not really into those, you might not like this, but if you like a scary story that has to do with paranormal, you're gonna like this. So yeah, those are all of my October book recommendations. I think if you read any of these books, you're going to have a good time. Some of the books that I want to read, I'm not going to give descriptions about them because a lot of these books, I am a type of person that likes to go into books blind. I usually have like a general idea of what the book is because I usually look up books before I buy them, but I don't know what these books are about. So I tend to like to go into books blind. I think it just adds to the experience. So I'm just going to like kind of quickly go over these books. The first book I have is The Haunting of Maddie Clare by Simone St. James. The next book I have is Cackle by Rachel Harrison. Witchy vibes, and I need witchy vibes in October. I have another Simone St. James book called The Broken Girls. Next I have The World's Favorite Ghost Stories by Toni Brueski. I hope I'm saying that right. But this one, another one, Ghost Stories, Halloween Time. We need this. Next, I have Incidents Around the House. I think this one has a creepy kid, and like I said, I eat up creepy kids, so gotta have spooky books for Halloween. Next, I have We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kleiwer. Next, I have Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. This one I think is like vampire, and I need fantasy in my life. So next, I have my highly anticipated The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Gotta read this one because I have been putting this off forever, and I'm so excited to read this. And like I recommended you earlier, If We Were Villains is apparently very similar to this, so I'm hoping that I absolutely love this. The next one is a newer release. It's called An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. This is again the same author as the one that wrote The Year of the Witching. Love that one, so I'm hoping I'll love this one. It's different settings for sure. This one takes place in a school. And I think it's like a magic school, so it's a little bit different, but I'm super excited for this one. Next, I have Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. This is just a book I've been putting off for far too long, and I think this is just going to be like a cozy, witchy vibe book, and I'm excited for that because Practical Magic, I love the movie, so I'm hoping I'll love this too, but excited for this one. And last but not least is Leigh Bardugo's The Familiar. I need fantasy books. I'm in a fantasy mood. October puts me back in a fantasy mood, and I'm excited for this one because I'm really enjoying her Ninth House series right now, so I'm really excited to start another one by her, and I'm hoping this one is really good. So yeah, those are all the books that I want to read in October. Those are all the books I highly recommend you read in October, and I am so excited for October and spooky season. Literally, October is just one of my favorite months, and I just can't wait to do all the fall fun October vibe things, going to pumpkin patches, a haunted house, all those fun things that we just love to do during fall and especially in October. So yeah, I'm super excited to read all of these, and I'm just excited to enjoy October. So that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what books you're going to be reading in October. If you've read any of the books that I've recommended, or if you've read any of the books that are on my TBR for October, let me know your thoughts on them. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye!